homesteaders, gardeners, and cooks. My name is Jennifer. Welcome to Miles Away Farm. Thanks for joining me in my kitchen. Today I am making chai tea concentrate, and I have been a tea drinker since I was a little kid. My grandmother's family is from England, and she was a tea drinker, and I can remember her giving me a cup of tea that was probably, 75% milk and a lot of sugar when I was about 4 years old. And I thought it was the greatest thing I'd ever tasted. And I've been drinking tea ever since. And I don't drink coffee, so I drink a cup of tea every morning. That's my normal morning routine. When chai became popular and the chai concentrate started coming out and all coffee shops started offering chai tea, I didn't love it because it is so sweet. I feel like it's a little bit like those international coffee mixes that are instant, that are just a whole lot of artificial, lots of things and a whole lot of sugar. And I didn't want something that was that sweet. And so I have been very disappointed at about 95% of every chai I've ever bought at a coffee shop. At this point, I actually often ask them, what brand of chai do you use? Because if it's one of the powdered ones rather than something that's actually a liquid from concentrate, I will not buy it. I will not drink it. I just find them gross. Anyway, so that became a long quest for me to figure out how to make my own chai concentrate instead of needing to buy it from the store. And there were copycat recipes, 10 or 15 years ago of Oregon's chai. And I think I probably started there. But most of the recipes for chai concentrate will tell you to cook the spices and the tea together. And the problem with that is that tea only needs to be brewed for 3 or 4 minutes. And if you brew it for longer than that, it starts to get really strong and really bitter, versus the spices, which are just starting to release their flavors at 3 or 4 minutes. And so if you boil it all together, what you get is a really weak cup of chai. When I was living in Durango, there was a coffee company there that made their own chai concentrate that I fell completely in love with. And they refused to give me the recipe. And I asked multiple times, and I asked after I'd left the state and said, look, there's no way I'm going to compete with you. I'm not even in the same state anymore. They wouldn't tell me what was in it. They did let me buy some of it. And I thought, oh, this will be great. I'll buy some of this and it'll have whole spices in it and I'll be able to figure out what's in it. It wasn't, it was completely ground. But they did tell me their technique. And so that's the technique that I've been using ever since. And I've played around with lots of different versions of this over the years, trying to figure out the right ratio of different spices to make it the perfect cup of chai. And it's still a work in progress, but it is a whole lot better than anything you can buy in the store. And so traditionally, chai comes from India. And I think chai actually just means tea. And it traditionally contains 5 different spices. And so those spices are going to be, first and foremost, cardamom. And cardamom is a pod that looks like this. Smells wonderful. We don't tend to use it a lot in the United States in terms of our cooking. Occasionally you'll see it turn up in a baked good, but we don't tend to do a lot with it. So cardamom, number 1 ingredient in chai. Cinnamon sticks or cinnamon is definitely always in there. Ground ginger of some kind is in there. And if you're doing it in just a single batch, you can use fresh ginger instead. It's going to give you a different flavor. But some kind of ginger. Whole cloves that are, then I grind them from there, but some kind of cloves, and go lightly on this. You can way overdo the cloves, and clove has actually got a numbing effect to it. I once had a cup of chai from an herbal store that kind of specialized in tinctures and that kind of stuff, and it had so much clove in it that it actually made my mouth numb. So don't overdo the cloves. That's my personal opinion. You can do what you like. And then whole peppercorns ground up is the other ingredient. And we don't tend to do a lot of stuff with pepper as an ingredient in something a little more sweet either. So there's some unusual mixes in here. And then if you like it and you want to put it in a little bit of star anise, which is going to give you a little bit of that licorice flavor, I like just a touch of this. I'm not a big licorice person, so this is totally optional. You can leave it out. I usually put just a small amount of this in. Other optional ingredients include nutmeg and also vanilla. And so those are things that you can add if you like them. I tend to stay a little more on the traditional side. And then the traditional tea that you would use in this is assam. And assam is a black tea that is really common in India. Today, I am actually going to be using a green tea, and that's because a couple of years ago, we went to an estate sale, and there were tons and tons of packages of tea. There was black tea, there was oolong tea, there was green tea, and it was pretty clear that maybe they had gone on a vacation at some point to an Asian country and brought back a lot of tea, because a lot of the containers weren't even opened. So they were basically brand new. I bought the entire lot of teas for, I think, $5, and I've been slowly working my way through them ever since. So we're gonna use tea, and this happens to be a green tea, but typically you would use assam. I'm just using this because I'm trying to use it up. So I'm going to show you how I make a chai tea concentrate that I enjoy pretty much every morning. Let's get going. This won't come as a shock to any of you who have followed me for a while, but I'm doing this by weight rather than volume. And what I'm doing is equal parts cinnamon, cardamom, ginger, and then half of that amount in clove and black pepper. And so I went with 20 grams here. And the fresher the ginger, the better. So if you've got powdered ginger that's been sitting on a shelf for several years, it's worth it to get some fresh. I like to break up my cinnamon sticks. This is all going to get ground in a spice blender, but they're too big to throw in there whole. And so I just am whacking these with the bottom of a mason jar to crack them open so that I can break them up into smaller pieces. And you could just use ground cinnamon here too, but it's nice to have fresh ground. It has a lot more punch. So we've got cinnamon, cardamom, ginger. Now we're adding black peppercorns in half that amount. So instead of 20 grams, I'm doing 10. And then some whole cloves, same thing, 10 grams instead of 20. And you could make this in any amount you wanted. This amount of dry mix will last me 3 or 4 batches. A little bit of star anise. And then I'm just putting all of this into my spice grinder. I'll link this spice grinder below. I really love this spice grinder, partly because it's stainless instead of plastic, and because the lid fits over instead of inside. Especially when you're grinding things like whole cloves, they're so hard that they will chip the plastic if the cover fits down inside instead of around. And I've had that happen, and then you wonder, am I eating plastic? So I'm very happy with this particular spice grinder. I also really like it because the actual grinder is washable, and so you can rinse it off, which is nice. Again, this is enough for probably 3 or 4 batches. And then here's my green tea. And I have no idea what this actually says. I'm doubling what I would normally use, and so I'm using a total of 10 teaspoons. So I'm doing 3 tablespoons plus 1 teaspoon for 10. And that's enough to make 80 ounces of tea. I'm only making 40 ounces because I want it to be double the concentration. And you can quibble about the temperature of the water for different kinds of tea. I'm not going to be fussy about it here, so just boiling. And this is 4 to 5 minutes later. This is really nice green tea. It's whole tea leaves, and they've opened up. And I'm straining these off into this small tea maker that I have. But you could do this in any container. It wouldn't need to be this one. I just happen to have it, and it's handy for the spice part that comes next. And then a total of 4 tablespoons of our chai spice mix. And that seems like a lot, but you really want this to taste like chai. You want it to have some really good spice. And then I didn't have quite enough water. This container holds about 40 ounces and I was a little bit short. So I'm just topping it up. And some of that super finely ground stuff is gonna go through this mesh strainer and sink. I don't really care, it's gonna be fine. And then what I'm gonna do is just let this sit until it's at room temperature. So this is 5 or 6 hours later. We're gonna toss what we can of our ground spice. Goes into the never-ending compost bucket. And then I'm just gonna pour it into a container that I can refrigerate. And a lot of the leftover spices that went through that mesh are just in the bottom of this container. And so I'm just gonna stop pouring before I get to that. And there you go, chai concentrate. Refrigerated, I would guess this would last at least a week. I usually use it up before that, and so that's about as long as my shelf life has been tested. And then to make your chai, you want equal parts of the chai concentrate and whatever milk or non-dairy milk substitute you're using. This cup holds about 12 ounces, and so I'm doing 2/3 of a cup of the concentrate and 2/3 of a cup of milk. And then because both of these are cold right out of the fridge, I microwave for about 2.5 minutes. And then I like to add a little bit of sweetener to this, but not a lot. So this is a teaspoon of raw sugar. And then just for fun, I'm adding a tiny bit of vanilla. Totally optional, and then a nice sprinkle of ground cinnamon just because it's so nice. And there you have it. Chai concentrate that does not taste like candy and is made with fresh ground spices. Really lovely. Thanks for watching, Tribe. If you like this kind of content, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, leave me a comment. I have new content coming out every week.